In our previous discussion, we have discussed about the chapter entitled Prevalent Moral Issues and Dubious Practices in the Workplace, wherein our first topic, which was discussed on our previous discussion, is all about the unethical practices on the part of the employers. Now we will be having the unethical practices on the part of the employees. But before that, we are going to review first the objectives of the said chapter. So first, explain ethical issues and practices. Second, explain why some practices are unethical. Third, describe the forms of unethical practices. And lastly, discuss the reasons why unethical practices are difficult to solve. Now let's proceed to the unethical practices on the part of the employees. First of this is the Lagay, LUSOT, and LAKAD. So when we hear the word Lagay, obviously all Filipinos have their own definition of this word. Lagay is a Filipino term which could either mean to bribe, referring to the act of giving and or receiving a bribe, or it could refer to anything given to someone. The given example there is government employee. In order to induce him or her to act dishonestly, or spur him to work well and fast. For instance, it could be in the form of money, property, or for special favors. Lagay stems out from the difficulties and disgust which the public commonly experience when they transact with government bureaucracies. Well, if you do not have connections and if you do not have the money to pay for special services, you may as well prepare yourself to bear with the long lines or endure several months of fruitless follow-ups before you get your transaction done. Filipinos describe this situation using the analogy of an unlubricated gear. Without grease, the gear will not turn. Thus, lagay comes from the phrase, lagyan ng langis para dumulas, meaning to grease or give bribe to speed up the transaction. In some cases, lagay is related to the concept of lusot, which literally means evading something, perhaps blame for an unaccomplished task by escaping through a hole or an opening. While in the workplace, it is commonly understood as the act of getting off a tight fix or a difficult situation and connotes the cunning maneuver of letting your or someone else's interest escape any obstacle, often through unjudicious means. Well, making a lusot requires lakad, or the act of an employee to personally attend to the problem. This is done by sidestepping other employees' responsibilities, ignoring the rules, and violating applicable laws just to right a wrong or get things done. Hence, the end of lakad is lusot. It can be the service demanded by an unscrupulous client offered by an equally unscrupulous employee in exchange for lagay. To complete and to make the system of the lagay, lakad, lusot more profitable, the decadent employee works in connivance with other people who are not formally connected with the office and are well trained and well versed in searching for and in inducing clients with problems. The public has come to know these people as the fixers. These decadent employees, together with their fixers, make it possible for people with unstable minds to legally possess firearms, for people who hardly know how to drive to have driving licenses, for people with pending criminal cases to have police clearances, and for drug users to nevertheless pass drug tests. These employees are liabilities in the civil service Society is better off without them. Lagay happens not only in government offices, but also in schools. Say, for example, an unruly, brainless, but wealthy students fail their subjects but continue to pass in school. What would be the reason? Well, the reason is not puzzling. These students are the first to pay overpriced tickets distributed by their schools, if there's any. They pay fees without question. They are generous. Why? Because they give their teachers gifts. Even the security guards feel accommodating these students when the students come in and out of school premises with or without their uniforms and identification cards. Not just in schools that we are experiencing lagay, the experience of our motorists gives rise to a new disgraceful term for lagay. Well, they call it koto. Some justifications of lagay are they justify lagay by saying that there is nothing wrong when the one presents gifts to employees for a job well done. It is part of our culture, they say, to give tokens as gestures of our goodwill, that it is just our way of saying thank you. Others justify lagay by pointing to the fact that employees, especially in government offices, because this tokenism can, at least, provide these employees who are not well compensated with another source of income or with a way to augment their meager salaries. Second, on these unethical practices of or on the part of the employees, we have the palakasan. The palakasan refers to the unethical practice of giving preferential treatment to a particular client to the unfair disadvantages of others. Social scientists claim that the problem of palakasan arises from our informal and familistic society. This is manifested in our inclination to prioritize the interests of persons whom we have some emotional attachment to or those whom we personally know. To reap the NG benefits of palakasan requires a connection within the inner stratum of the organization. They say, if one is said to be malakas, usually the person is a close relative, a compadre, or a longtime friend of an employee. Well, to be malakas is to be treated exceptionally and accorded with special privileges not accorded to others. The malakas person does not have to wait. The common rule of first come, first serve does not apply to these favored people. He or she does not have to serve first. Or, no follow-up. Or on the other hand, may do the follow-up himself or herself. In short, it means no worries. In some cases, a person who is malakas or a special client is not necessarily related personally to the employee. He or she could be anyone capable of paying the price to be treated special. In this case, lagay is in some way related to the issue of palakasan as the former could result in preferential treatment. The third is we have discourtesy. It is not uncommon to see an arrogant employee in the workplace. They can be unfriendly, unapproachable, impolite, and can make the company's clients feel uncomfortable. Some employees are always too busy, usually not related to the performance of work, to recognize the presence of their clients. It will help if employees keep in mind two things. First, the reason why they are employed or why their situation or firm exists is because of these faceless clients or customers. Without the public, which graciously pay its taxes, needing the services of particular government office, for instance, there would be no need for such government office and its employees. Without people buying the products and buying for the services of private companies, there would be no need for these companies and their employees. The existence of these offices depends on these ordinary clients and customers. They deserve and expect nothing less than quality service. Employees, whether public or private, out of gratitude or indebtedness, have the moral obligation to treat and to serve the people well. Secondly, customers or clients, being human, greatly value kindness, respect, and recognition. They generally desire to be treated properly and humanely, to feel important and to feel cared for. It pays to treat customers and clients with respect because the act is usually reciprocated. It earns the employee equal respect and recognition, praises, honor, and sometimes even promotions. In contrast, retribution for bad manners usually comes in many forms. Sales may be lost, promotion may be shelved, and company image may be tarnished. Another unethical practices is the improper use of office materials. Well, this is commonly seen inside a particular office. Some employees believe that using office materials for personal purposes is part of the privilege of their office. They think it is alright to call home for a few minutes, or that there is nothing wrong when they use office computers to type and print a few pages of their children's term papers or assignments. What makes this belief and the practices that arise from it wrong is that such practice are unfair and selfish. The company in effect pays for these personal calls, worst if these are international calls, and their office supplies and electricity, which when used for personal costs does not benefit the company but their own selfish ends. While it is true that employees enjoy the privilege of using office equipment, these are provided to them to make the performance of their official duties more efficient and not for any personal purposes. Another problem with office material is the tendency of some employees to use them carelessly. One example is the poor handling of fragile office materials such as photocopying machines and computers. These pieces of equipment do not last long because employees intentionally or out of sheer carelessness or lack of concern misuse them. Some employees use computers as if they were typewriters, pounding on keys furiously. There are instances when employees complain that their computers would not turn on, only to find out that they plugged their 220 volts computers into a 110 volts socket. It is also common to see employees kick photocopiers or whack computers when these pieces of equipment fail to work. This is the reason for the joke. Primitive people do not only live mountains. Anthropologists should be informed that most of them are working in air-conditioned offices. Another problem is the wastefulness of employees as they do their work. Because they seldom work with focus and diligence, some employees have to redo their work many times, over and over again, thereby wasting precious materials and, of course, time before accomplishing the work right. Fourth, unethical practices, we have the pilferage. We say pilferage if someone is stealing small items owned by someone else, either from the company or from the employee. Employees or workers bring home office supplies like bond papers, folders, staplers, scissors, pastes, even paper clips, staple wires, and fasteners. This has led to the observation that rats infest not only houses but also the civil service. Rats store things in their holes, as most public employees store public properties in their homes. Well, these people justify their acts by saying that there is nothing seriously wrong in bringing home small stuffs. What they refuse to realize is that the act is a form of stealing. Taking something not yours, no matter how small, is still stealing. It is theft. It is not only unethical but punishable by law. Corruption usually starts with desiring small things. Bringing home a big stuff usually starts with bringing home small ones. Another unethical practice is gossiping and bootlicking, which is usually found inside offices which are idle, meaning they are not really working but they do the gossiping first before they act. This is one of the most favorite pastimes of employees. And what is that? It is the idle talk or malicious gossip. Some offices are beehives of the juiciest storytellers, people whose days are not complete without discussing someone else's life, problems, and miseries. The practice must be avoided because it demoralizes employees. There is nothing more painful than to be accused of something you did not do and by someone who hides under the cloak of secrecy. Well, bearing false witness against our neighbor is not only against the law of man, but also against the law of God. Our faith and our sense of morality dictates that we do not speak ill of everyone. We should not do to others what we don't want others do unto us. Employees should contribute in making the workplace a place where mutual trust, confidence, and respect could flourish, a place where all could prosper and live a satisfying and fulfilling life. Aside from the unethical practices of the employees, we also have other ethical issues in focus, and that is three. First, we have the strike, second, bluffing, and third, whistle blowing. In this lesson, we are going to discuss the number one first, which is strike. Strike comprise not only concerted work stoppages but also slowdowns. It is the deliberate reduction of workers' individual production. We have the mass leaves or the sit-downs. Sit-downs happens when employees stop working but refuse to leave the premises of the firm. They refuse to leave the plant and the machines and do not allow others to operate these machines and, of course, other such activities. A strike is a legitimate social act. Why? Because the law provides for it. Actually, the Constitution and the Labor Code protect the right of workers to collective actions such as strikes. But, if it is legal, does it mean that it is necessarily ethical? The claim that strike is a matter of exercising a legal right is riddled with problems. If, for instance, teachers go on strike as an exercise of their right to assert their demand for higher salaries, their concerted act could the parallel right of their students to learn. Using the streets for mass demonstrations also disturbs the right of other people to travel unobstructed and to perform their regular activities. When workers refuse to work or do things to express their grievance, the public, not only the employer, suffers. Thus, an ethical issue is formed. If the right to strike necessarily undermines some other equally important rights, is it morally justifiable? Some observers argue that strike is hardly a selfless endeavor. If workers strike, The direct intention is not for the good of the general public, but for the good of workers participating in it. When workers strike to demand for a wage increase, it is their own wage increase, their own welfare they assert, sometimes to the detriment of the welfare of others. This observation leads to another related issue. If a strike concerns only the benefits of those who participate in it, is it morally justifiable? Perhaps we could make a better judgment if we will consider the primary reasons why workers go on strike. Well, here are some of the several causes of the strike. Number one, to compel recognition of a labor union. Second, to exert pressure on the company during bargaining or work negotiations. Third, to exert pressure on union demands for wage increases and other benefits. Fourth, to protest unfavorable actions taken by the employer. And number five, to protest unfair labor practices. These reasons imply rather that the strike is used as a means to assert the need of workers to be treated well by their employees or by their employers, to work with dignity and to ensure for themselves a wage that could at least enable them to support and secure the health of their families. In an economic system where exploitation of workers becomes a factor in the profit formula, workers have historically suffered the ill effects of low living standards. Workers could sometimes hardly feed their children, send them to school, or pay the cost of their hospitalization. These reasons imply that the strike is used as a means to, first, assert the need of workers to be treated well by their employees. Second, work with dignity. And then third, secure themselves a wage that could at least enable them to support and secure the health of their families. We go now to number two, which is bluffing. The contradictory interest of employers and employees is why, from time to time, they are forced to enter into a competitive process of negotiating, especially in cases where both decide the terms of employment through collective bargaining. Employers and employees sometimes cannot avoid taking on an essential gladiatorial type of relationship. Both are expected to present and insist specific terms which are at least minimally acceptable, if not highly favorable to their vital interest. It is in cases like this where bluffing is usually committed. But what do we mean by bluffing? Bluffing means conscious misstatements, exaggerations, and or concealment of pertinent facts. Through bluffing, either party can convey to the other an overstated portrayal of its ability to inflict or to endure cost. For the workers or for the employees, work cost should be in the forms of shutdowns, mass retirements, and dismissal. For the employers, cost could be in the form of strikes. While bluffing in some cases can also be entirely nonverbal. A display of support from the membership, for example, attendance to a solidarity rally, or the labor unions call this a show of force, is enough to create an impression of strength and ability to impose great cost. Generally, the practice of bluffing is intended to force the other party into concession and or to prod the other party and find out its extreme points or sticking points. Then we have the whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is very known in our government. But we have a question here. Is the whistleblowing ethical? Well, the phrase whistleblowing connotes the act by an employee or a worker of exposing to the public the action of his company that he perceives to be wrong or contrary to the general interest of society. Whistleblowing can also be defined as the act of the employee of exposing immoral or illegal practices of a co-employee. But for our present purpose, we will be referring to our first definition of whistleblowing. That is, a great concession to dictate of conscience. It generally arises from clashes between and among the duties we must render to our various social affiliations. Our duties and obligations to our family, to our work or profession, and to the society are usually sources of moral dilemma. It is not easy, for example, for any worker or employee to come out in the open with accusations against his or her employer, even though the accusation is true, if it would mean losing his job, which could result in his inability to send his children to school and so on, one should think it over. It could also mean ending a promising career and being resented by some coworkers. But to think about the ethical problem of whistleblowing only in view of its consequences is to miss the more significant aspect of the issue. Sometimes, the more important talking point is not whether going public is ethical or not, but when how the truth is to be told to the public. Sometimes, it is not a question of whether society benefits from whistleblowing, but whether whistleblowing is done rightly or not. Our best example for this whistleblowing is the case of Miss Napoles and her whistleblower. We proceed to the next slide. We have the unsafe work situations of specific groups. We have four specific groups. First, we will be taking working children. We all know that there are some children around the Philippines who are working at their early age. Working children are often involved in unsafe work. Urgent attention must be paid to children in hazardous employment. Their protection requires legislative action, education and training, and assurance that at least very young children are not allowed to work. Innovative healthcare systems must be implemented to protect them. Second is the migrant or the migrant workers. Migrant workers usually work in new settings under conditions which are unfamiliar to them and are less protected for various economic and social reasons. Their precarious employment conditions often mean that they do have to endure unsafe working conditions. Many of them have difficulty in following instructions and safety warnings in a language foreign to them. The places where they work, in particular in small and medium-sized enterprises, construction, agriculture, and plantations, are often not effectively covered by legislation on occupational safety and health. Migrant workers are our OFW or people who are working in a new environment or working abroad. Third, unsafe work situations is for the disabled, older, and indigenous workers. This special group tends to accept unsafe and unhealthy working conditions. Many of them work outside the organized sector and are not union members. Because of the circumstances of their employment, they are not given support to improve their conditions. Special protective measures should be developed for them as well. Fourth and last, we have working women and mothers. This special group forms an increasing proportion of the workplace. They say we have gender equality. What man can do, women can do as well. And what women can do, man can do as well. The basic issue is to provide equal employment opportunities for both men and women. This requires that due regard to be paid to family needs while working to enable all individuals to amply develop their potential. Child care services, flexible working time arrangements, non-penalizing career breaks, and leave schemes. Access to training also needs special attention. In fact, all these measures contribute to securing the safety and health of working women and mothers. The role of employers and employees. First, we will be dealing with the role of employers. Employers should ensure that the workplace, machinery, equipment, and processes under their control are safe without risk to the health of the employees. Second, chemical, physical, and biological substances and agents under their control are without risk to health when appropriate protective measures are taken. Third, adequate protective clothing and protective equipment are available where necessary. Say, for example, if you are working on a 7-story building, all your carpenters should wear their protective dresses. If you are working on offices, there should be a uniform used by your employees. Fourth, measures to deal with emergencies and accidents, including adequate first aid arrangements, are available where necessary. There should be a medical kit for all places in your company in case of emergencies. Let's take a look on the role of the employees. Well, workers and employees are responsible for, first, taking care of their own and that of others who may be affected by their acts or omission at work. Of course, you should take care of yourself first before taking good care of others. Second, complying with instructions given to their own and others' safety and health and with other safety and health procedures. Third, using safety devices and protective equipment correctly and not rendering them inappropriate. Fourth, reporting to their immediate supervisor and situation which they believe could present a hazard and which they themselves cannot correct. If the employee feel that this situation cannot be solved among themselves, so definitely who is the first person you think that you would tell about this situation? Of course, it would be your immediate supervisor. You should also, or employees or workers should also report any accident or injury to health at work because there's no one who could help you pay the bills in the hospital other than your boss. And that would be the last topic on the chapter Prevalent Issues and Dubious Practices in the Workplace. And we will be discussing the another chapter on the another video that I'm going to upload. So see you next topic.